Hi, I'm Peter J Rea. Welcome. I'm wearing a T-shirt from Marion, Ohio. In 2008. I spent 4 months there, and my father's hometown. In 1920, Warren G. Harding was elected U.S. president, and he was from Marion, Ohio. Today's topic is Resalest Remarkable Books, number 26. The first book today is Ragtime by E.L. Doctorow, published in 1975. This is a wonderful book. It's a novel set in New York City between 1902 and 1912. My mother's mother was visiting, my grandmother, back in, I think, in the late 80s, and she ended up reading this, and she loved it because it was described very well the time of her youth, the first decade of the 20th century, that era, which was really something. As the airplane era was evolving, airplanes and automobiles, trains had been dominant, and of course, ragtime was a type of music. E.L. Doctorow was a wonderful author. The next book is Billy Bathgate, also by E.L. Doctorow, published in 1989. I believe there was a Dustin Hoffman movie made, if I'm not mistaken. This is a novel, I think, set in the 1920s or 1930s. And Dutch Schultz, who was a major criminal back in that era, is featured. And this is a story of a boy who grows up in poverty and gets involved in the world of crime. And it's a very, very compelling book. There's one scene, it's kind of a disturbing scene. It was memorable. They decide to kill a guy, and they row him out into New York Harbor. He's in a boat, and the guy who's about to die is, I think they have him tied up. They're going to throw him in the water. He has something heavy tied to his feet, so he'll sink. And he's like insulting the guy who's, saying stuff against the guy. I think it was Dutch Schultz. And Schultz says to him, "Well, let me put it this way. I'd rather be sitting where I am than where you are." Of course, he didn't really. Of course, the thing is, what criminals don't know is the law of karma, God's perfect justice. Anyway, this is a very compelling story. The next book is Loon Lake, also by E.L. Doctorow, published in 1980. Now, Loon Lake is actually, I have a cousin who has property on a loon lake in New York, but a different loon lake. And this is a story set at this loon lake in New York State. And I don't remember much about it. Of course, loons are a bird. Something about this, sort of a nice place to live or stay on a lake. Very peaceful, and that's about all I can tell you. Anyway, E.L. Doctorow, I highly recommend his books. The next book is Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie, published in 1980. Now, this is a novel set in India. Salman Rushdie, actually, years ago, was quite famous because he was a Muslim fellow, and he had written something that offended some Muslims, and they had this. They decided they wanted to kill him. There was a bounty placed on his head. Although I believe he survived that, although he had to go into hiding. He was very famous. That was from another book he had written, the Satanic Verses. The next book is No Kava for Johnny by John O'Grady, published in 1961, and Smokey Joe the Fish Eater, John O'Grady, 1972. These were two books in one, and the first book describes growing up in Samoa, which is in the South Pacific. Very interesting. In the southwesternly part of Polynesia, simple life, and this tropical island. And the second book is about the life of a cat. So these are a fine volume written by this Australian author. The next book is The Clash of Civilizations and the Remaking of World Order by Samuel P. Huntington, 1996. Yes, this is a very interesting book, very well written, and talks about the complicated world we live in today, the rise of China, the decline of the West, and the Islamic militancy, and the issues of the United States role. The United States has been a superpower, but things are always changing in the world, and Americans need more wisdom to understand our role in the world, we have to have more wisdom and to figure out how we should interact with other countries and get along. And the author makes the point that we should avoid war with China, because of course China has really grown in power, a very wealthy country, and also a military power. The next book is A God in Ruins by Leon Uris, 1999. This is a futuristic novel for that time. It depicts the presidential election in 2008, of course, which is now history. And this Leon Uris gets into the issue of anti-Semitism, which is always something that Jewish people are concerned about, and America's role. He's in support of. He was favoring Bill Clinton. And this is sort of a futuristic novel. Mostly Leon Uris writes novels that are historical. So in this case, he's looking ahead and because that's a fascinating topic, trying to see what's coming in the future, which is prophecy. And I think what you can do with enough prayer and with a study of history. The next book is Out of the Blue by Orel Hershiser with Jerry B. Jenkins, 1989. Of course, in 1988, the Los Angeles Dodgers won their last World Series, and their star pitcher at that time was Orel Hershiser, who was really tremendous. He's a good fella, and he also helped the Cleveland Indians when he came and played for us in the mid-1990s. So, good fella, Orel Hershiser. The next book is Ghosts of Manila by James Hamilton Patterson, 1988. In Manila, I used to go to the church services for my church, the Self-Realization Fellowship services, and this is one of the books that I would read in the taxi going to the services. And it's a book. It's a novel set in the Philippines. I thought the author did a very good job. The next book is Paradise by Toni Morrison, 1997. This is a novel that talks about an all-black town, all African-American town in Oklahoma. Years ago, African-Americans, they were having so much trouble with interactions with European descent Americans, a lot of conflict and really mistreatment. So this book takes place years ago. But this sometimes they would decide to found their own town, to get away from all the troubles. Of course, that doesn't mean there won't be troubles, but they tried to do that. And it's a pretty grim story. But the author won the Nobel Prize, not for this particular book, but Toni Morrison, a fine African-American female author. The next book is Necessary Losses: The Loves, Illusions, Dependencies, and Impossible Expectations That all of Us Have to Give Up in Order to Grow by Judith Viorst, 1986. This reminded me of the books by Gail Sheehy. It's about life, childhood, about adult life, sibling rivalry, parenting, death, and so forth. And actually, the title is I think very appropriate, because as we go through life, we have to face life as it is, not as we wish it would be. And of course, we can be happy, not by getting everything that we want, but by living a spiritual life, by seeking God and by serving God in some way in this world. The next book is Patty Hearst, Her Own Story by Patricia Hearst with Alvin Moscow, published in 1982. Of course, Patricia Hearst was a young lady, Patty Hearst, who was kidnapped by the Symbionese Liberation Army, and she was from a very wealthy family. And I think, I don't know, I think they were trying to get a ransom, but anyway, they didn't. They kept her, and so she describes this nightmare that she went through. She was just living her life, and one day, she was grabbed. They just grabbed her, and she was a prisoner for quite some time. And she was kept blindfolded in a closet for 2 months at the beginning. She was raped many, many times. And then she was brainwashed. She became completely dependent on these people. And, really, she wound up becoming a part of the group. And of course, there's a famous photograph when she was involved in a bank robbery holding machine gun. So eventually, she became an urban guerrilla, or part of this, this revolutionary, this crazy organization. And then when she was finally rescued, she actually had to go to court. The public turned against her. They didn't really understand. It was sad. People were so hard on her, and she actually went to prison for these crimes that she was involved in. Even though she was brainwashed, and it was very sad because she definitely should not have served time in prison, but she did. I don't think it was super long. It was at least a year or two. But anyway, the public, it's too bad when people are. You would think there would be understanding for her, except she was from a rich family. But maybe the people were jealous. But the people weren't understanding. Oh, look at her! She's robbing a bank. Terrible. They didn't realize that she really had been. What could she do? She was completely dependent on these people, and she really went through a nightmare. And then the hard part was afterward, when the public was very hard on her. The next book is Billy Budd Fort Tupman by Herman Melville, 1870. Euthyphro by Plato, 400 BC, and Oedipus Rex by Oedipus at Colonus by Sophocles. These are three books in one volume from the Great Book Society. And of course, Billy Budd was one of the famous. I remember my sister Pamela. And this used to be a book that kids read in American high schools, and then of course Sophocles, the great ancient Greek author, and Oedipus Rex was the ultimate Greek tragedy. The next book is The Alexander Principle by Wilfred Barlow, 1973. And I don't remember much about this book, but I wrote my diary about my bad posture. It must have had something to do with posture, which I've had bad posture since a young boy, and it's really been something that's really hurt me a lot, because you lose energy, you lose strength, because you need to have it's very important to have good posture to have good health, and I haven't had that. I developed, it was a very, very sad thing that I developed, and I was kind of hoping that this book would help me, and I've worked on it. I think I still have bad posture. It's just one of those things. Also makes it hard to meditate. The next book is The Chinese Looking Glass by Dennis Bloodworth, 1966. This is kind of an old book on China, not very up to date. And I think it's an important thing. China is a very important country to learn about. This guy did a good job writing about China, since China has become a powerful country, very influential, very large population. There are Chinese people all over the world now. And so I thought this was good. And in fact, definitely ought to read more books on China. A very important country we need to learn more about. The next book is Ethics by Aristotle, 350 BC, and Confessions by St. Augustine, 400 AD. These are two great books in one volume. And of course, Aristotle is one of the great, wonderful, ancient Greek philosophers. And St. Augustine, one of the tremendous saints in Christian history, that has helped keep Christianity going. Christianity, we started with Jesus Christ, but there's been a lot of hard times over the years when Christians weren't Christian, and the Christian church became very weak. But then a saint would come along to revive Christianity and show the real meaning of love, of loving God, someone who really loved God and loved everyone. And St. Augustine was one of those saints that helped revive Christianity and strengthen it and keep it going. The next book is The Story of Lakeside by Osmer L. Shepard, 1923, in Lakeside, Ohio, which is where our families had family reunions. And I did a lot of history, a lot of research on Lakeside. I came up with a T-shirt called Lakeside, Ohio, the way the whole world should be. And then I would have on this shirt, I don't have any of those. I don't know if I ever made it into a shirt, but I had these posters that I made, put up around, promoting Lakeside. They really did a good job of developing a very healthy, summer community for people to come. We'd only go there for a week. Real nice place on Lake Erie, as the dock, and then these simple pleasures, shuffleboard and putt-putt, and walking around, enjoying the trees and the sky and the birds and this nice downtown area. The The next book is Light and Life, Lakeside on Lake Erie, 1923 to 1948, by John Harding Butler in 1948. More wonderful history of Lakeside, Ohio. Arthur Hoover, who was he was the director of Lakeside, and the Hoover Auditorium is named after him. We stayed in his house, which is, you could call the White House of Lakeside. And they would have these German camp meetings until the Germans actually got older and their children had learned English. They had a revolving electric cross by the dock at the pavilion. Otto Magley was one of the VIPs in earlier Lakeside history. The next book is Lakeside Lore, Ohio's Chautauqua Vacation Land by Eleanor Durr, published in 1979. Wonderful book. Had very tremendous and wonderful information about Lakeside and the dock, Abigail's was a fine restaurant, the patio where you get a tin roof sundae, and a candle store. You could buy these decorative candles. Very nice place to go on Lake Erie, not too far from Sandusky, and it's nice to walk around. Very quaint place, very nice place, very peaceful. The next book is The Bliss of Freedom by Master Charles, 1997. Actually, I purchased this from an SRF group member in the Philippines from Cabanatuan, and he was raising money. This is a spiritual book and has some very interesting and inspiring ideas. The next book is Codependent No More by Melody Beattie, 1987. It's an outstanding book about this very important topic of codependency. These individuals, mostly women, who get involved with helping people, but then they become sick themselves because they develop sick relationships, and they can't really have relationships based on a mutual respect. They have to feel superior to the sick person, and actually they really aren't helping. They think they're helping. They're just actually enabling the alcoholic mostly. So this is good to help these people to recover so they can have healthy relationships with people instead of these sick ones, which they do. The next book is Me and DiMaggio by Christopher Lehman Haupt, 1986. This is about a baseball fan in 1979 who was he's writing about his experience as well as a New York Yankee fan, and very interesting. And of course, Joe DiMaggio was really the ultimate hero back in the day. This considered very glamorous fellow who had done very well, played center field. And so this is about the life of a New York Yankees baseball fan. The next book is Taipan by James Clavell, published in 1966. This is a novel set in 1840 Hong Kong. Just imagine. Dirk Struan he's the Taipan of Hong Kong. His son Kulam is his son from a Chinese mother. There's Gordon Chen, and then there's his Chinese mistress Mei Mei, and then his enemies Brock and Garth. So Clavell's a master of historical fiction, similar to James Michener. And the next one I was gonna read was Guy Jin, although I never read. I think I had it, but I didn't read. This Clavell is a little bit tougher than Michener, similar but a little bit tougher. The next book is Sober But Stuck by Dan F., 1991. This is an Alcoholics Anonymous book that I purchased at a meeting, and or friends of Dr. Bob or Bill W., this organization which helps people who have drinking problems, and about recovery. It's not, when you have alcoholism, it's not just about quitting drinking. You have to change yourself. We all need to change, and the alcoholic definitely needs to change so he doesn't go back to drinking again, which means becoming a better person, having a spiritual life, praying to God, and doing service work, and caring about other people, and working on his character defects. The next book is Pat of Silverbush by Lucy Maud Montgomery, 1933. So I was wrong. I didn't realize I had read any of the Pat of Silverbush books. So there's one more I did. I'm pretty sure I didn't read that one. This is a wonderful novel, similar to Anne of Green Gables series and the Emily of New Moon books, and it's set in Prince Edward Island, Canada, back in the old days, the early part of the 20th century. And this character, Pat, Patricia, she loved her home and her family, and she hated about the changes in life. And this is a reality of life. Life is always changing, and we all have to deal with it, don't we? And of course, very often we resist these changes. We don't want things to change, but people age, different things happen. We all die, and people move away and get married and whatever. So anyway, this is kind of one of the themes of this book, is the challenges of changes in life. The next book is A Shoot in Cleveland by Les Roberts, 1998. This is again one of the part of the series of the Milan Yakovich books. This story about this character who's a Slovenian-American private detective in Cleveland, Ohio, who goes about investigating murder mysteries. And what caught my attention in particular was the author mentioned 3 of the tremendous Cleveland Indians baseball players of that era: Albert Bell, Jim Thome, and Sandy Alomar. And he also mentioned the Cleveland Browns. That really kind of hooked me on these novels by Les Roberts, these references to Cleveland sports, and the fact that the story does take place in Cleveland, Ohio. The next book is, First Lady from Plains, Rosalind Carter, 1984. Of course, she was the First Lady of the United States when her husband, Jimmy Carter, was president. He was elected in 1976 and served from 1977 to 1981. And he was defeated by Ronald Reagan in 1980. And she wrote this quote: "The people made a terrible mistake. The one I hurt for most was Jimmy. The most difficult concept to bear was his rejection by the American people for whom he worked so hard and for whom he cared so much." So anyway, Jimmy Carter, he was one-term president. He had problems as president with high inflation during his time, which hurt him, and then this Iranian hostage situation, which was very damaging. He's been very active in international politics since then, sort of as a goodwill ambassador, and he certainly kept busy. One of the most, you could say, active ex-presidents or retired presidents. The next book is The Greenlanders by Jane Smiley, 1988. This is a wonderful novel. It's set in Greenland in the 1300s. Just imagine, the people there were, I think, Norwegians, and they had a pretty tough time. Very inhospitable environment, very hard. They had some contact with Eskimos, which would be the American Indians from the far north. And, the growing seasons were just so short. It's just so hard to make a living. And actually, these people all died. These individuals, they all died. These were Europeans. And every year, they'd run out of food in spring. In fact, they would have their Lenten fast, because the food would be gone. So what could they do? They'd have to fast. And some years, the fasts would take them straight to heaven, because they would die. So this is some story that this Jane Smiley put together. Just a really amazing story, and it shows that she does a good job of depicting life in Greenland. Back in just imagine the 1300s. In high school we had a AFS student from Greenland, and I was pretty shy, so I wish I'd been more outgoing and become friends with her. It would be fascinating to learn about that country. Actually, I think it's still a part of Denmark. It's not really an independent country. I'll have to research that. Kind of reminds me of my grandmother, who used to say, everyone has a right to their opinions, but no one has the right to be wrong in their facts. The next book is For the Flag by Jules Verne, 1896. This is vintage Verne. It's predicting a super bomb, kind of like an atomic bomb. This is another part of his scientific prophecy. And kind of reminded me of a James Bond movie, because you have bad guys who hold the world ransom with a super weapon, which is a common theme in these, not only James Bond, but other movies that deal with a global catastrophe. The next book is Beyond Codependency and Getting Better All the Time by Melody Beattie, 1989. This is a very important topic, codependency, helping these people to recover from this condition. So that because it's one of these unknown conditions. Not people don't know it exists. Those people who are codependent, people who develop this, who they seem to get addicted to sick relationships, and they think and it's kind of mysterious. And they're good people, but this is something that happens to them. And in a way, I've seen this in myself a little bit. It's good to help people, but you really want people to get better. You don't want them to stay in a perpetual need of being helped, so you can feel useful and neat and so that and important. No, that's wrong. The next book is If I Never Get Back by Darrell Brock, 1989. This is an amazing book. It's a time travel book, and it goes back to 1869 and the first professional baseball season. This guy goes back and he joins the Cincinnati Red Stockings. In 1869, this team was organized and the pairs were played. That meant that they were professionals. But they were not in a league. They would travel around the country playing whoever wanted to play, whoever could put up a team. And they won every single game that year. So this is the beginning of professional baseball in the United States. And this author, boy, it makes you really feel like you're part of it. This is the birth of baseball. If you're a baseball fan, interested in the history of baseball, you have to go back to the 1869 Cincinnati Reds, who were undefeated, did not lose a single game all year. And then some years later, the professional leagues were organized, the National League. The next book is Mexico by James A. Michener, 1992. Wonderful historical novel about an amazing country. And it gets into bullfighting. And the thing I thought was interesting about this book was the pre-Spanish Mexico. Before the Spanish conquest, you had the Aztec Empire. And we know the Spanish were pretty bad. They were pretty cruel. But actually, the Aztecs were much, much worse. They had a religion was so barbaric, which demanded human sacrifice. And so when you think about it, even though the Spanish really weren't very Christian, they actually technically were Christian and brought Christianity, even if they didn't really practice it. But the message was there of loving God and loving each other. And it was you could say it was a good thing that the Spanish came to Mexico, because the Aztec Empire was so terrible, horrible what they were doing to those people. And these Aztec priests, who were like they would remove human hearts. And then they would eat these hearts, and there'd be blood, all over. They'd be just all over their faces, running down their bodies. And so this was their religion. So they really had this horrendous religion, pre-Spanish. So it was actually a good thing that those Spanish priests, the Aztec Empire fell. Fascinating country. And so, really good job, James Michener. Yeah, it was amazing how it's hard to believe that the Spanish, very small numbers, defeated the Aztecs. They had a strange belief, the Aztecs had, that they could only fight a guy one-on-one. And they had some of these battles, you'd have like hundreds of Aztecs, and they could have easily killed all the Spanish guys. Maybe there'd be 10 or 15 Spanish guys, and they'd be waiting in turn to fight Aztecs. And they just kept killing the Aztecs one after another. These guys, because the Spanish had better weapons, I guess, better swords. And so anyway, this is really something. Well, it appears we're out of time. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you find a good book to read. Because to quote Groucho Marx, outside of a dog, a book is man's best friend, and inside of a dog, it's too dark to read. So anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for being patient. God bless you, and I will see you next time.